This isn't just a story about love turning to obsession. It's a warning, a tragic reminder of how easily someone can slip from safety into the grasp of a relentless predator. Alice Ruggles was young, full of life, and had everything ahead of her. But she never stood a chance. Not against a stalker who knew exactly how to manipulate, how to instill fear, and most terrifyingly, how to get away with it. This isn't just another case of a relationship gone wrong. This is a case of a system that failed. A case of a man who flooded her with messages, tracked her every move, and ignored every no. Because in his mind, Alice belonged to him. The police were warned multiple times. Alice was terrified, but help never came. And on one fateful October evening in 2016, she opened her door for the last time. This is the story of Alice Ruggles, the woman who begged for protection but was met with silence. A case that forced the UK to confront the terrifying reality of stalking, and a family left asking the question, why wasn't she saved? Do you think the UK's stalking laws are strong enough? Or do they leave victims vulnerable, just like Alice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this case important, hit that like button. It helps spread awareness. And if you want more real UK crime cases, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because these stories need to be told. Alice Ruggles was 24 years old, full of life, and loved by everyone who knew her. Born in Leicester, she was the kind of person who lit up any room. Witty, intelligent, and effortlessly charming. After graduating from Northumbria University, she settled in Newcastle, where she worked at Sky as a telecoms coordinator. Friends described Alice as bubbly, sharp, and fiercely independent. She was the one you'd turn to for a laugh, the one who could lift your mood with just a few words. But beneath her bright personality, there was something else. A growing fear. A shadow that followed her everywhere. Tremaine Dillon, known as Harry, was the man Alice once thought she loved. A lance corporal in the British Army, stationed at Glencorse Barracks in Scotland, Dillon had the kind of background that seemed impressive at first glance. But beneath the uniform, he was a man obsessed with control. Alice and Dillon met through mutual friends online. At first, it seemed like the perfect match. Long conversations, shared jokes, and a connection that grew despite the miles between them. But it wasn't long before the cracks started to show. Dillon was possessive, jealous, and manipulative. He demanded to know where Alice was at all times, who she was with, and why she wasn't responding fast enough. Friends noticed how her usual confidence seemed to shrink under his constant scrutiny. What started as love quickly turned into control. When Alice finally broke things off, she thought it was over. She had no idea that for Dillon, the breakup wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. When Alice Ruggles ended her relationship with Tremaine Dillon in the summer of 2016, she thought she was closing the door on a toxic chapter of her life. She was wrong. Dillon didn't just take the breakup badly, he refused to accept it. Within days, the messages started. At first, they were desperate pleas, apologies, declarations of love, promises that he could change. But when Alice didn't respond, his messages took a darker turn. Hundreds of texts, late-night calls, unwanted gifts. He hacked into her social media accounts, reading her private messages. He knew things he shouldn't have known. It was clear. He was watching her. Then, one night, she looked outside and saw him. He had driven over 120 miles from Scotland to Newcastle to stand outside in the dark, silent, motionless, just watching. Alice was terrified. She knew this wasn't normal. She went to the police, desperate for help. Officers issued Dillon with a warning, but that was all. No arrest, no restraining order. Alice tried to move on, to push the fear aside, but Dillon wasn't done. He wanted control. And when he realized he was losing it, he decided if he couldn't have Alice, no one could. It was a Wednesday evening, October 12th, 2016, when Alice Ruggles' worst fear became a reality. At 5:30 p.m., Alice spoke on the phone with her mother, Sue. She sounded frustrated, exhausted by Dylan's relentless harassment. That very day, he had left a voicemail, pleading with her to take him back. But Alice wasn't falling for his manipulation anymore. She was clear. She wanted nothing to do with him. At 6 p.m., she sent a voice message to her close friend Maxine McGill. Her voice was shaky, uncertain. She told Maxine she thought Dylan had been outside her home again. She had seen flowers left on the windowsill. Another unwanted gift. Another violation of her space. What Alice didn't know was that Dylan wasn't just near. He was already there. At 6:30 p.m., CCTV footage captured Tremaine Dillon's car in Gateshead, just minutes from Alice's flat. He had driven all the way from Scotland again, this time with a clear purpose. He wasn't here to beg. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to end it. At 6:45 p.m., Dylan was at Alice's property. Upon arrival, Dylan surveyed the area around Alice's residence, ensuring he remained undetected. He then approached the rear of the property, where he discovered an open ground floor window. Exploiting this vulnerability, Dylan stealthily entered the flat, armed himself with a sharp kitchen knife, and confronted Alice in the bathroom. Alice barely had time to react before Dylan attacked. In a violent assault, he inflicted multiple injuries, including fatal wounds to her neck. The wound was catastrophic. Alice collapsed on the bathroom floor, bleeding out within minutes. Alice's lifeless body was later discovered by her flatmate, who immediately alerted the authorities. At 6:55 p.m., just moments after he had taken Alice's life, Dylan fled the scene. He got into his car and drove north, leaving Alice alone in a pool of blood. At 7:30 p.m., Alice's housemate returned home. As soon as she stepped inside, she knew something was wrong. The apartment was eerily silent. Then, she saw the bathroom door ajar. And there, on the cold tiles, Alice was lying motionless. Her housemate immediately called 999. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Alice Ruggles was pronounced dead at the scene. Within hours, police were closing in. At 7:45 p.m. on October 12, 2016, just minutes after Alice's body was discovered, Northumbria police launched a full-scale murder investigation. The scene inside her Gateshead flat made one thing clear. This was not a burglary or a random attack. Alice had been brutally murdered, and the way she was killed suggested it was deeply personal. Her housemate, still in shock, immediately told officers about Tremaine Dillon, Alice's ex-boyfriend. She described how he had been stalking Alice for months, bombarding her with messages, hacking her social media, and even showing up uninvited outside her home. Alice had been terrified of him, and now she was dead. The police knew exactly where to start. By 10 p.m., officers had already started gathering key evidence. CCTV footage placed Dylan's car near Alice's flat at 6:30 p.m., just an hour before she was found murdered. Phone records confirmed that his mobile had connected to a cell tower near her home at 6:45 p.m., and just 15 minutes later, he was back on the road, heading north towards Scotland. The timeline was undeniable. At 3 a.m. on October 13, 2016, armed police stormed Glencorse Barracks in Scotland and arrested Tremaine Dillon. Officers found him in his room calm and emotionless, as if nothing had happened. When questioned about his involvement in Alice's murder, he denied everything, claiming he had not been anywhere near Newcastle that night. But police already had overwhelming evidence against him. His DNA was found inside Alice's flat. His fingerprints were on the bathroom door where she had died. His phone records placed him at the scene. The CCTV footage showed his car in the exact location, at the exact time. The evidence was undeniable. Dylan was taken into custody and officially charged with the murder of Alice Ruggles. The man who had stalked, terrorized, and ultimately killed her was now caught. But for Alice's family, the nightmare was far from over. Now, they had to face the painful battle for justice. 1 year after Alice Ruggles was murdered, her family sat in a courtroom, waiting to hear the man responsible finally face justice. The trial of Tremayne Dillon began on October 2, 2017, at Newcastle Crown Court, and from the very first day, his defense was built on lies. Dillon denied murder, claiming that Alice's death had been a tragic accident. He told the jury that Alice had fallen onto the knife during an argument, insisting that he had never intended to hurt her. But the forensic evidence, the chilling phone records, and Alice's own terrified messages in the days before her murder, painted a very different picture. The prosecution, led by Richard Wright KC, laid out the events of October 12, 2016, in painstaking detail. They described how Dillon had driven from his army barracks in Scotland, arriving near Alice's flat in Gateshead at 6:30 p.m. He had parked his car nearby, waited for the right moment, and at 6:45 p.m., Dillon was at Alice's property and forcefully entered the house through the backside ground floor window. Within minutes, he attacked her with a sharp knife and slashing her throat in a single, brutal motion. By 6:55 p.m., he was already fleeing the scene, leaving Alice bleeding to death on the bathroom floor. As the trial continued, prosecutors revealed that Dillon had a long history of controlling behavior, not just with Alice, but with previous girlfriends as well. Witnesses described how he would monitor their movements, demand access to their phones, and manipulate them into staying with him. The court heard from 3 of his ex-girlfriends, who all described the same pattern: intense jealousy, emotional abuse, and threats whenever they tried to leave him. Perhaps the most shocking moment of the trial came when Alice's own voice was played in court. A voicemail she had sent to her friend Maxine McGill just hours before she was murdered was presented as evidence. In the recording, Alice sounded shaken and nervous while telling her friend she believed Dillon had been outside her home again. The courtroom fell silent as her words echoed through the speakers. Alice had known she was in danger, but no one had stopped him in time. The defense attempted to argue that Dillon had no history of violence, claiming he had only gone to Alice's flat that night to talk. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. The CCTV footage, the DNA at the crime scene, the phone records placing him at her flat, all left no doubt that this was a premeditated murder. On October 26, 2017, after nearly 4 weeks of trial, the jury retired to consider their verdict. It took them just 2 hours to reach a decision: guilty of murder. The next day, October 27, 2017, Dillon stood in the dock as his sentence was read. Life in prison, with a minimum of 22 years. He showed no emotion, no remorse, as the judge condemned his actions, calling him a self-obsessed, manipulative liar who had brutally ended Alice's life simply because he couldn't control her anymore. If you found this case important, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because these stories need to be told. Justice for Alice. Justice for all victims.